Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Uh, Today is the ninth day of November 2025. Uh, Again, we're going to be reading from a particular book tonight. It's just simply called Psychology and Kabbalah. This was written, I think, in the 19, well, I better not say, but it was written probably in the 30s or 40s, maybe a little bit later. I need to find a copyright date on here when it was published. But we're going to be dealing with chapter 21 tonight. Along 20 we just did. This was simply entitled Circumstances. So the one I just did was on the issue of society. So this is how the pressure is put on a child or even adult. But I mean, basically, a child. This is what he's doing. He's just starting with what we call parents, and then the whole ramification of mommy and daddy being and maybe a sibling or two, such and such. So you got to deal as a child has to deal with it, not only his mom and dad. He has a differential between who he prefers to be around, she, whatever way. Usually, boys tend to be closer to their moms, and I don't know if that's always at young, although that's maybe true. Daughters tend to be closer eventually to their dads, um, and I think you know it's interesting what takes place. There's rivalries. There's all kinds of things going on. A lot of children are trying to grow up, figure things out. They don't understand what's going on. It's a growing up phase. It's what it is. A lot, we take this for granted, but there's a lot of things going on. So this again, like I said, this is going to be dealing with circumstances. This is chapter 21. In Kabbalah, everything is part of a unity. Nothing happens in existence without it affecting everything else. No matter how large or small an event might be, thus a human being's actions alter the balance of the universe to a greater or lesser degree, even as by the same law, events in the macrocosm of the Milky Way and the solar system that influence mankind to produce history and the fate of individuals who are highly sensitive to the harmonious and dramas of the universe dance. For example, let's just talk about the what's happened just recently in Louisville, Kentucky, with the UPS airplane crashing, and it's what's happened here. With I think there was three on board. They're on their way to. They're going to go to Hawaii. So the FAA, I think, you have to have three on board because it's going to be an 8-hour trip. As far as I know, I assume it's going to be taking place from Louisville, Kentucky, all the way to Hawaii, and I assume that's Honolulu. That's what I'm expecting. 'Cause that's the capital of Hawaii, plus it's the biggest city, and that's an 8-hour trip. So they took off, took off, so to speak. So again, like the third guy there is in case something happens. Okay, someone gets tired, whatever. So there's this whole idea of simply, and that's all on the board. That's just three people on board this plane, the cargo ship airplane. All it's carrying is cargo from the UPS building there in Louisville to go all the way to Honolulu, Hawaii. It's a similar thing and with FedEx. FedEx has this locale and located in Memphis, Tennessee, where it ships out. I don't know if it's worldwide, maybe. UPS does worldwide too. I know that I've gotten a couple packages from China, and what I understand is simply there's a direct flight. These are cargo planes. These are not. It's not what I call planes that are carrying people. These are cargo ships, airplanes. So what I understand simply is that it's the eastern part of China it flies out of, and I'm sure there's three people on board. It may be four people on board because it's a longer flight, if I'm correct. Might be wrong. Um, so from China, I don't know what the distance is. They don't fly in straight to, they don't fly into Hawaii. They fly directly to Los Angeles or San Francisco or maybe possibly Seattle. Okay. But then let's think about a friend of mine who I knew flew in from Australia, and that's a direct flight. So how many people are on board? You got pastors there, completely different ball game. But you've got to have, again, these are long flights. Okay, now you might quote unquote gain some time by coming here. That's why people affects them what they call jet lag. These are long. These are 16 to 18-hour trips. This is not as hard on the body because the body is reflecting that. Although the body tends to reciprocate pretty well. Anyway, I've got off tangent here. So here it is. In Kabbalah, everything is part of a unity. Nothing happens in existence, which I've already said. However, each person is composed of a unique mode as they react in a different way to the situation being created by cosmic forces which affect them and their society. Correct. People react differently. There's no doubt about it. Taking a larger scale first, there are periods in history when great activities occur and others when hardly anything happens. Likewise, there are epochs when exploration is the preoccupation and others when art is the foundation. I'm sorry, art is to the forefront. There are also times of mass migration or stagnation or rigidity or revolution with social changes sweeping whole continents. Modern science has not yet explained this phenomenon, although it has many statistics and observations, because it cannot see the interaction of different levels of reality and only perceives the physical data. It was only when the discovery of the unconscious aspect of human existence was generally accepted that another dimension revealed itself in the hidden forces that work upon society. Alas, most of this knowledge is applied to the mass psychology of propaganda and marketing. Definitely, that is definitely true. No doubt about that. It is only recently that social trends are being thought of as an expression of some greater pattern in the rhythm of history. Before the so-called Age of Reason, the universe was seen as an interrelated whole with events in the upper levels having a profound effect on those below and vice versa. Some cultures symbolize the macrocosm as a hierarchy of gods, others as planets and accomplice the reciprocation of the four worlds. Taking just the lower three levels, the cosmic processes of Raya precipitates shifting patterns in Usara. That is the psychological realm. These movements are transmitted by the celestial bodies, which, as we have seen, represent archetypal principles that act upon the psyche of humanity in an unfolding stream of trends composed of the various combinations of the sun, the moon, and planets. This ever-changing situation is due to the different factors and rhythms of the solar system as they interact in relation to the Earth. For example, the sun has a daily and an annual cycle, and the moon has a monthly pattern, which, together with their 3 monthly and 6 monthly orbits of Mercury and Venus and the longer cycles of the outer planets, make up a complex system of effects as they pass through the 12 divisions of the zodiac. These combinations create the psychological climate of mankind. For instance, a conjunction of Mars and Saturn in the sign of Aries can precipitate a dramatic war crisis as it did in 1940. I'll say that again, folks, because most of us don't look at this. These combinations create a psychological climate of mankind. For instance, a conjunction of Mars and Saturn in the sign of Aries can precipitate a dramatic war crisis it did in 1940 when Germany invaded the lower countries and France, threw the Allies out of Europe, and blitzed Britain. So I'll ask the question here because I don't know, but I'm speculating here. Do wars start? Are there people who actually follow the stars who recommend to certain leaders to quote unquote to attack at a certain time? That's just a speculation question, but that just sort of threw something out. Why did Germany do this? Well, did they know their astrological signs? I believe they did. Now, that's something. There's a particular book long ago I read that dealt with the whole issue of when the communists took power eventually into Russia. It's also based upon astrological signs. They did it, and they enter the building. It's There's a book out there I read. It talks about this whole issue, parts of when they decided to do certain things. It was based upon the time. Every bit of it is. It's not. There are those who know that. You see, they know that certain things happen, and it would be the best possible moment for that to take place. That's the truth, folks. It doesn't just simply happen randomly. There are forces that do this. Understand that. There's forces outside, but man is himself is learned to see these forces, you see. But that's not in the book here. But I just want to explain to this what, talking about Germany invading such and such. So continue on. The result of this continent and later global conflict was to disrupt work and domestic patterns and displace millions of people as they were caught up in collective events. You bet. In the case of the individual, the effect is more specific as they have a particular part to play within the general scheme. For example, supposing a man was born in the early year 1900, he would have been too young to have fought in the First World War, and then too old to fight in the Second, but just the right age and temperament to be useful in the inter and post-war peace. In contrast, the fate of someone incarnated a few years either side of that date might be totally different because they could contributed something that was needed in time of war. This is the work of providence, which is organized the best time and place for the personal and collectively experience to interact. So what he's trying to say here is simply is that the higher power simply is that God, and he, in a way, to some way have an effect upon this planet to basically, in some ways, to help it to grow up. Okay, to help it to grow up. It's a way of a step, so to speak, what I would call baby steps for man to simply grow up psychologically, also socially. Seeing the individual as this larger setting is most important. The general atmosphere of a society may be lax, balanced, or stringent, depending upon the state of the nation's tree. In one country, individuality, for instance, may be highly cultivated. In another, close family ties may be the rule. In certain cases, education can be the prevailing interest of the community. In another, money. A child born into any of these situations must inevitably absorb them into the collective level of the psyche as it passes through its various stages of development. However, not every person will react in the same way to his background because some are constitutionally to fit well into that particular society and others are not. A thinker, for example, would have no problem if brought up in a university town, but he might have great difficulty as a laborer's son. Likewise, a feeder, F-E-E, feeler, I should say, would have a hard time in a household of intellectuals, while a family of musicians would suit him well. Yeah, the feel of it, music has a feeling, you see. Music does report, especially classical music, but other music does too. Providence might set him a different situation in order to work out some karma, and this will be directly related to the collective situation. Abraham Lincoln was not born on a frontier farm without good reason. He took role of president during a most terrible civil war. Figure 26 here says crisis. All at some point face minor or major crisis. Abraham Lincoln had, as a man from the frontier, many trials and tribulations in addition to the normal ones of life. He had to make decisions about great moral issues, peace, and war. This responsibility rapidly aged him during the American Civil War. These were problems for a man of destiny. For most people, it might be changing professions, which person to marry or whether to divorce. There are, however, inner crises for those on the path of development. They involve issues of conscious change, choice, and facing denial or a personal devil. This is from the study from life during Civil War in the 19th century. At the level of the individual, the factor of time and place in the general circumstance are also governed by the planetary Sephiriah sequence. Some people, as we have noted, react to being incarcerated and get stuck in the gestation and birth process, resulting in a stunning physical or psychological Others unable to come to terms with life on earth during the Jasada period of or forming an ego are marred by inability to cope with the outside world. None of these difficulties are accidental, but situations provided by providence to help psychological growth. Free will, however, gives the right to accept or reject the challenge. That's correct. Let's make that. There's no such thing as determinism in some ways. Now, what I mean by determinism, this is what the church teaches a lot of times, that you're determined to be, you're going to be a Christian or not. Okay, as though God is going to force you in a way. So that's what determinism. I disagree with that particular perspective. Free will allows someone to make good choices or bad choices. There's no excuse with determinism. Simply as though God chose someone and such and such. That's not exactly true. Okay, that's kind of a very much detailed to the point. Man always has free will. If man does not have free will, then he becomes a robot. So he has to learn from his mistakes in order to process and become a better person. And that will be, when he makes a mistake, it may be a grinder all the way down and takes him down to to depression, so to speak. Others may rise from that, you see. It depends on what happens. But there's always a way of how this works. It's beyond anything most people would even think about. So many people have early memories of such moments of choice, like a child who decided not to grow up and remain a physical, psychological dwarf. This is a extreme case, but it is only a question of degree. Example of a Yesod crisis growth process occurs when a child has to deal with not being totally independent of parents. Out of this emerges a healthy ego or the need to remain a psychological infant. If this lunar stage is not completed, such people can remain independent or even in adulthood because their Yesod cannot fend for themselves. Providence usually comes up with a parent substitute like the state until the person can work it out. And growth crisis can occur in the form of what we call school examinations or the inability to think coherently, which has to be mastered in order to communicate with others. However, for some people, this mercurial faculty to talk and collect data can be the problem that cuts them off, like the scholar who never related to people unless he was lecturing. Fate, fortunately, sends him a lovely Venus to teach who took him through his difficulty. There's always a solution offered if we can see it. The Venetian Nezai crisis comes with adolescence, and the onset of powerful feelings. These have to be handled skillfully, or the individual will run wild and lose all they have learned, like dropouts who remain obsolete. Maturity marks the shift from the active right pillar position of Venus to the center column position of the sun of Tikva, where a person reaches their physical prime. There they fill out the full form of their Yusara vehicle, which has been presented since birth. At this point, a discerning eye can perceive what an individual was like in their last life and what they might become this one. All the processes spoken of are subject to a myriad subtle influences ranging from the physical situation through family attitudes and the values of their society to the ever-shifting celestial bodies that express the climate of the upper worlds. The child who is still very susceptible to events in the non-physical dimension, life is lived between two regions. On the one hand, he or she is being taught to live in an elementary environment inhabited by people who reject many molding factors of them. And on the other, the child exists in a dimension in which memories of a former life, that is, dreams and fantasies, play an enormous part. The quality of this inner life is watery, that is, but day by day, the growing body emerges the psyche in earthly reality. Many people recall this floating, end quote, time with a sense of loss, but it must pass as a lower psyche and body become firmly interlocked. All this conditioning to circumstance is, as said, subject to choice. By this we mean that there are certain decisions that are not part of the routine physical or psychological process. Seen in terms of the tree, free will operates from the derived Hesed and Tipharah triad of the soul, which hovers between the upper and lower faces of the psyche. As such, the soul has the freedom to maneuver because it does not come under such laws as physical growth and decay or automatic obedience to spiritual injunctions. People can, for example, choose to submerge themselves in materiality or raise themselves up to heavenly heights. They can refrain from participation in events such as condoning or condemning or join in. Many people will choose, for example, or for instance, to spend their lives devoted to social status, while some, by choice, retire from the world and become recluses. Yet others choose to remain where they were bored and do nothing with their gifts, while some go abroad or start great enterprises. Many choose not to choose and waver in psychological limbo as others decide to rule everyone but themselves. Everyone has choice. It is with us from the moment we are conceived. One's circumstances and stage of development physically, psychologically, and spiritually may vary, but the possibility of free will does not. Sorry, folks, something's happening. Hold on a second here, folks. I don't know what's going on here. Sorry for that, folks. That just happened. I don't know what happened here. Let me get back where I was at. So we'll go back here, start out with the same paragraph here. Everyone has choice. It is with us from the moment we are conceived. Our circumstances and stage of development physically, psychologically, and spiritually may vary, but the possibility of free will does not. The various crucial points in infancy and childhood are not dealt with by the ego, but by the self, which operates from a pivotal position on the tree. When he's talking about the tree, he's simply talking about the whole thing of, the whole, like I said earlier, showed with you guys earlier. And let's see if I can find it again here. He uses the analogy that this is what he's talking about here. This is the tree here in Kabbalah. Okay. And there are various colors to basically separate the two, each side here. So you have blue, you have purple, you have red, you have yellow at the top, and these are the separations of that. Okay, and then he talks about these various areas of the body on either on the right pillar or the left pillar. You see, and then in the middle. You see, okay. Everyone has a choice. In fact, as many people recall, such crucial moments of decisions have the extraordinary quality and clarity of consciousness. This is quite different from the general process of education in which we learn the rules and skills needed for the circumstances that fate has given us. So we're going to stop there. That's the end of the chapter. Again, pardon me, I don't know why that came up. It was in the background. I don't think I pushed the play button as far as I know of. But anyway, we'll stop here. Appreciate you being here. If anyone knows, so this is a little longer. Let's see what time it is. I might try to do another one here tonight. We'll see if I do. We'll see. If you see me again, I'll be back. How about that? Okay. Thank you. Have a good evening. Again, this is Discerning What is True. We're going through psychology and Kabbalah. And this particular writer, his name is Zev Ben Shimon Halevi. And this is the book I am yet to finish here. It's a very difficult, it's thick, as I call Phil when we talked about it. You can buy the book. It's simply it's Thames and Hudson. And the author has written quite a few books. This is just one of the books he wrote, which was written long ago, so to speak, but it's pertinent for what we need today. So this explains something else. Let me just say one more thing. This explains why this book was, he wrote this book, okay, not knowing anything, such and such, but eventually it's, he's passed away. But the key is simply is for us at this time. See, this is part of maybe in some ways a providence of what the universe is doing with mankind. You see, this is what it's about. See, all right. We'll be back in a little bit. Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.